For almost a decade, rumours swirled about children being raped and brutally assaulted in a small town in northwest England.
Every time we went up, it always led to something sexual, anything from kissing right through to, you know, sleeping with the person.
She was handed over to his supposed nephew simply as a birthday present.
Scores of children were being groomed by predominantly British Pakistani men.
They targeted teenagers on the streets of Rochdale. All 5 were white and from troubled backgrounds.
Rochdale preceded Jimmy Savile, Max Clifford, Rolf Harris, all of that. Everything that we now know of and think of in terms of child sexual abuse followed Rochdale.
We discover how it was possible for so many young girls to fall prey to these perpetrators.
And so the girls, either too scared to refuse or given so much to drink they didn't know what they were doing, were driven across the north to have sex with queues of men.
And why they then found it so hard to escape.
If he wanted something, it was either yeah or it happened in a bad way.
Their cries for help going unheard by the very people who should have been protecting them.
Maybe they just thought I was some stupid kid and it just didn't mean anything.
Police and social workers failed to acknowledge that the crime is going on.
It's very clear that abusers in Rochdale were laughing.
The people who should have been looking after these girls were effectively turning a blind eye to rape.
The actions of the Rochdale Groomers are crimes that shook Britain. We begin with the story of a young girl from Rochdale who has asked us to call her Lily. Lily was born into a world of drink and drug abuse. By the time she was 9, she had already lost her father.
When I was growing up, it was just really hectic. A lot of it I've blocked out because of the amount of things that have happened.
Her mother became an alcoholic, and by the age of 11, Lily was placed with a foster carer.
When I was in foster care, because I didn't feel like I was wanted, I used to just go out every day and night and stay out till as late as I could.
It was during this period that Lily was sexually assaulted for the first time. She was just 11 years old, and the man who abused her was 19.
There was a guy who lived like 2 doors down from where I was living with my foster carer, and he knew my foster carer and my sister, and they used to talk to them. So obviously I just presumed he was okay to talk to. He took me to his family's like barbecue kind of thing. He gave me a drink and then he took me into this bedroom and he started kissing me in there. I felt really good because it was like the first time I'd felt loved.
Lily innocently discussed the incident with her foster carer, who promptly notified the police and Rochdale social services.
When the police came round and they asked me to show them where he was and where it all happened and stuff, I didn't know what was happening, I didn't know anything was wrong. No one really explained to me, I was just confused. I don't really know what happened with the police investigation, but with social services, they just left me. They left me with the same foster carer, didn't move me or anything.
Aged 13, Lily was allowed to move back in with her mother. But due to her battle with alcoholism, her mum wasn't able to offer Lily the stability and love she was desperate for.
When I moved back with my mum, it ended up being really, really hard because she was still drinking. I just felt like I was on my own. I felt like I had to be my mum's carer.
I wasn't in the best state of mind. We had quite a lot of arguments, a lot of falling out.
Over the next few years, Lily continued to escape her home life by seeking the comfort and attention she craved in a number of encounters with older men who offered her cigarettes and alcohol in return for sexual activity. Walking out of school one day, Lily, now 15, was approached by a 32-year-old man named Abdul Huq, also known as Saj.
Yeah, hello, excuse me.
I met a taxi driver who pulled alongside me, said, you know, am I okay, and kind of took like a bit of an interest in me, but it also felt like he was concerned for me, which felt nice because it was that care that I wasn't receiving anywhere else. He said, oh, get in and I'll, you know, take you home. So I got in and he took me home. Then we swapped numbers. A couple of weeks after that, he rang me and he said, can I come over and see you? So I said, yeah. He took me up like an alley kind of thing near the big church in Rochdale near Town Hall. We just parked there and then like did foreplay. Every time I seen him, he used to give me fags. So he used to give me one when I got in the taxi, and then he used to give me the packet to go home with. I didn't really see it at the time, but now that I'm older and looking back, it seems a bit like payment.
I think we forget that grooming meets a need. Quite often it meets a need in the young person to feel loved, that somebody cares about them, to feel like they're in a relationship. And I think how grooming typically works is once you know you've got a young person to a position of having complete trust in you, then you will manipulate the situation to make them think that they owe you something, that you're deserving of something, and make them think that it's totally normal, for example, to demand sex from them in exchange for the fact that you've given them alcohol or cigarettes or things like that.
As Lily's life grew increasingly chaotic, her mother became more and more concerned about her constantly going out at night time.
I just wanted her home safe, and we'd just end up in that same old argument, trying to tell her she wasn't going out. And then I just used to sit there and cry and think, what can you do? It was a constant worry, but I was frightened if I put too many boundaries in for Lily, she wouldn't want to stay with me. I was frightened to death of losing her. Like that.
It can be very difficult. It can be very difficult for parents to identify the warning signs and symptoms of abuse and exploitation, and what might be normal testing and sometimes challenging behaviour by children as they develop into young people and then teenagers as well. It's a very difficult dividing line.
I started hanging around with this one Asian male, and he used to take me out in his car. We had like foreplay and stuff like that, and then that's when I started getting phone calls off people I didn't know, but I weren't sure how they got my number.
Lily found herself being regularly contacted by men who would ask her to spend time with them in their flats.
Every time we went up, there was always some kind of alcohol, either vodka, gin or something like that. It always led to something sexual by the end of it. Anything from kissing right through to, you know, sleeping with the person. I felt like they was my boyfriends, and that's what you do. Plus, they'd bought me beer, so, you know, can't really say no.
Still just 15, Lily continued to go out at night and now found herself in what she considered to be a more serious relationship. This time with a 22-year-old man named Freddie Kendukumana.
When I first met him, he was fine. We used to talk about the future, and, you know, he said he wanted kids with me and I said I wanted kids with him. And then as we got more and more into like the kind of relationship, he started becoming violent, started hitting me. One night he tried sleeping with me and I said no, and then he didn't take no for an answer. I was scared of him because I knew he was stronger than me, and I knew that if he wanted something, it was either yes or it happened in a bad way. So it was just sometimes easier to just kind of go along with what he said.
In search of support and advice, Lily started meeting with a sexual health worker from Rochdale's crisis intervention team.
We used to chat about like sexual health and stuff. And they was the only people that I was ever consistent in my life. They was the only people that never judged me. She used to say, you know, if you got a boyfriend, are you still seeing this person? And then I said, you know, I've got this boyfriend called Freddie. And then I told her what had happened that night and kind of explained to her what had gone on. And then she was like, well, that's rape. And I said, no, it's not. She said, it is. I knew what rape was, but with me and him, it couldn't be because he was my boyfriend. So that's why he did what he did. That was what I would, you know, is in my own head. So I thought about it and then I was like, well, it must be, you know, and then it kind of clicked.
In Rochdale, there were certainly workers out there, some professionals out there who were recognising what was happening and desperately trying to raise awareness of it. But I think within the culture of what was going on, they really were lone voices.
In November 2008, 15-year-old Lily was taken to see a Rochdale police officer so that she could give a statement about the abuse she had suffered from Freddie Kendukumana.
When I first reported the thing with Freddie, it was a male police officer and he was kind of like sighing and had his head in his hands and just looked really disinterested. After I did the interview, the contact just dwindled away to nothing. I just felt like maybe I was overreacting, you know, maybe they just thought I was just some stupid kid and it, you know, it didn't mean anything.
I can't imagine anything worse as a victim of abuse than finally realising you're being abused, plucking up the courage to tell somebody that you've been abused and then nothing being done and you're being abandoned to your abuser. I can't imagine a situation that leaves you more terrified and more vulnerable.
With a lack of interest shown from the police and social services, Lily found the pull of affection too hard to break away from. Still 15, Lily found herself in a relationship with a 23-year-old man named Rohiz Khan. But as Lily approached her 16th birthday in July 2009, she had the opportunity to take a break and consider where her life was headed.
I think with being away from everything that was going on, I had time to reflect on things. I kind of thought, oh, this isn't right, this is wrong.
However, escaping the abuse wasn't easy, and on their return, Lily and her mother were subjected to a period of terrifying intimidation.
You're sticking with me, okay?
When I'd come back from the holiday with my mum, I tried to leave Rohiz Khan and he wouldn't let me. He'd smashed my windows, he'd made threats. He said he was going to plant drugs in my house and all different kinds of things. It was really terrifying, and the longer I tried to break away, the worse it got.
In Rochdale, Greater Manchester, a dark pattern of abuse was slowly starting to be revealed. From the ages of 11 to 16, Lily was sexually exploited by a number of older men as she searched for an escape from the misery of her life. Tragically, her case was just the tip of the iceberg. In August 2008, Greater Manchester Police received a call from a takeaway shop in Rochdale.
Yes, please.
The caller stated that a young girl was causing criminal damage to the restaurant. She was arrested in the street that same night and taken in for questioning.
So from the beginning, can you tell us exactly what happened, please?
It's not what happened at the end, it's been going on for ages.
During her police interview, the 15-year-old was pressed over the motivation for the attack.
When you decided to trash the kebab shop, what exactly was going through your mind?
She reveals some shocking information.
It's been going on for like months now, and it's not.
Just texting?
No,
What
like
else?
he started texting, and then it got worse, and he started like pressuring me and like forcing me to do stuff. It's not. That's what made me like.
What stuff?
Like, it's like sexual thing.
This young girl's nightmare should have come to an end at this point, but it was only just the beginning. Known only as Girl A for legal reasons, this child's ordeal began weeks earlier, when she started visiting two local Rochdale takeaways, Tasty Bites and the Balti House.
Girl A was brought up initially on the west coast of Lancashire, but then her family moved to the Rochdale area. She went through the teenage rebellion and she went off the rails. Girl A fell into the clutches, basically, of an older girl who initially seemed to be a really good friend, and so embraced this new life of fun, drinking, staying out late at night, coming back whenever she felt like it, and was effectively lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that her friend would look after her. But on one particular day, the suggestion was, we will go to a takeaway, we can get some free food, which they'd done before, and actually it was a complete betrayal and that she was being groomed.
A worker in one of the takeaways, 55-year-old Shabir Ahmed, appeared to offer a warm and comforting refuge for Girl A and her friends during their numerous visits, giving free food, alcohol and cigarettes to the girls. This went on for several weeks until things took a sinister turn.
On this particular afternoon, Shabir Ahmed, he said that he just wanted a chat. He starts talking to her about, I've given you things, now it's time for me to have something, and then ushers her upstairs. She was reluctant, but felt that she had no option but to go up. Bear in mind, she's very much a child. He's in his 50s, and suddenly she realizes it's payback time. Come on. They go into a bedroom. There's no actual bed, it's just a bare mattress. He just pushes her down and just summarily rapes her. Afterwards, she's in floods of tears, she's bereft, and what he says to her is something that ultimately is horrendous. He says, "Don't cry, I love you."
You know I love you, don't you?
What is a girl of 14 supposed to make of that? And while it's going on, there's a clock high up on the wall, and it's got the face of an angel.
After the men had befriended the girls, they would invite them upstairs. This is one of the rooms where they were plied with alcohol to get them drunk. And this is one of the rooms where they were sexually exploited. For some of the girls, it became a way of life.
Horrifyingly, with barely any time to recover from the attack, this young girl was taken by Shabir Ahmed to a different location, where she is then raped by another man that very same night. Unable to escape, Girl A soon found herself trapped in a dark network of abusers.
Very early on in the abuse of Girl A, she was handed over by Shabir Ahmed to his supposed nephew, Kabir Hassan, simply as a birthday present. I mean, it just beggars belief that a human being can be passed over in that way.
A few weeks later, on the 6th of August 2008, upset and angry, Girl A lost control and started attacking the Balti House in retaliation for the abuse she had suffered.
Yeah, the girl's being quite aggressive.
She snapped, wasn't going to take any more. The call had been made to the police by Kabir Hassan, and within a very short time was arrested for criminal damage. She was the villain of the piece, supposedly, but once she got in to be questioned, she suddenly told them, "I've been raped."
After documenting Girl A's accusations, Greater Manchester Police spent the following 11 months investigating her serious claims. Shabir Ahmed and Kabir Hassan were arrested and interviewed, but denied the allegations. They were bailed pending further forensic results. Girl A, meanwhile, was charged with criminal damage.
As soon as she told the police what had actually happened, as soon as she'd had the courage to say it, they should have reacted, and they didn't. Not properly, and therefore she felt betrayed. She had nowhere to go, and very rapidly fell into the clutches of an even more ruthless man in many ways, Abdul Aziz.
37-year-old Abdul Aziz was a local taxi driver and also the ringleader of an even larger grooming gang.
She got caught up in a world where if she was going to school, she would be texted or rung. Men would turn up in vehicles, off then, back to the house, out of school uniform, and off to be raped. She was trapped, and genuinely trapped. Couldn't get out, couldn't break away.
We'd get in the car and then they'd drive us, and we'd get to the place, a flat or a house, and then there'd just be different men there waiting. Towards the end it was like, it could be up to 5 different men in a day.
It wasn't until this young girl found herself pregnant and no longer wanted by the perpetrator that she was able to escape from this horrific web of cruelty.
The abuse that girl A suffered started in August 2008, but was over by the end of that year. But she'd gone through 4 months of hell, effectively.
In July 2009, 11 months on from the moment she reported being raped to police, a letter from the Crown Prosecution Service stated that on the basis of the police investigation put to them, she would not be deemed a credible witness in court. When the case was updated by a police officer, the notes were, "They do not consider there is sufficient evidence to provide a realistic prospect of conviction of rape, given the unreliability of C1. The investigation into Girl A's claims were marked, no further action."
It's very clear that abusers in Rochdale were laughing. They were able to absolutely exploit a situation where professionals were not doing anything or not doing anything proactive to remove children from abusive situations.
I think the most shocking element is that the people who should have been looking after these girls, should have been in place to protect them, were completely failing in their duty, effectively turning a blind eye to rape.
Having confided in Greater Manchester Police in August 2008 that she was being sexually exploited by a number of different men, the child, known only as Girl A, now found herself being told that her allegations would not be believed by a jury in court, and the men who she claimed had abused her would not be facing charges.
I think all too often the focus is on the behaviour of the young person and the decisions that they're making without looking at the actions of the adult who, let's face it, has deliberately targeted them.
More than 2 years later, in December 2010, Greater Manchester Police formed a specialist team of officers to deal specifically with sexual abuse cases, having previously been too focused on other forms of crime.
They actually formed an operation called SPAN, which really got to grips with it. Their attitudes fundamentally changed. They really wanted to believe victims rather than not believe them, which was the default position beforehand.
The new investigative units began looking into Girl A's claims, but this time in much finer detail. What they started to uncover was a complex web of victims and abusers who were often only known by their nicknames. The inquiry was further complicated by the fact that many of the victims identified were reluctant to come forward or struggled to remember the details of their abuse, having been under the influence of drink and drugs.
Once police forces up and down the country started actively looking for child sexual exploitation, what shocked them was the scale of it.
As more and more victims came to light, so did the list of perpetrators, the majority of whom were British Pakistani men and working in Rochdale's nighttime economy. One man's name in particular came to the forefront. Shabir Ahmed nicknamed Daddy, earlier arrested and investigated in 2008 when girl A had accused him of rape, was now revealed to be a potential ringleader of a large grooming gang. But because the Crown Prosecution Service had already stated there wasn't credible evidence against him, Greater Manchester Police faced a huge sticking point. The prosecution solely relying on evidence from girl A, whose integrity had been called into question. Without being able to charge the ringleader, they wouldn't be confident in securing convictions against the other members of the gang. But in May 2011, changes were made within the CPS, and Nazir Afzal became the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the northwest of England.
I was familiar with this issue of grooming gangs up and down the country, but I had not had direct handling of one of these cases myself. I wanted to firstly understand whether there was an issue here, and secondly whether there were any live cases that I could work on or my teams could work on. And so pretty much within the first couple of days, my colleagues brought to my attention this case that had started some years before, 2008 in fact.
The case that Nazir began to focus on was that of girl A.
There was a very, very poor police investigation. Certainly back then, they took the view that this young girl could never be believed by a jury. So a decision that had been taken in 2009 not to prosecute Shabir Ahmed and the other man in relation to girl A meant that potentially nobody could be prosecuted. So without reversing the decision, it would have undermined the cases against all the other men, because they could turn around to a jury and say, well, why am I here when he, alleged ringleader, is not here? It was pivotal that that decision was taken. The rest of the case, like a pack of cards, would have just fallen over.
In June 2011, Nazir Afzal made the incredibly rare decision to overturn the original ruling made by the CPS almost 2 years earlier. Greater Manchester Police were finally given the power to bring charges against 58-year-old Shabir Ahmed and 24-year-old Kabir Hassan.
The reversal of the decision not to prosecute was the opportunity to put everything right. If it hadn't been reversed, then nothing else could have happened.
With the help of the victims identified during Operation Span, including girl A, Greater Manchester Police were now able to bring charges to 11 members of the gang. However, by the time of their arrests, the number of abuse victims was now a staggering 50 young girls aged between 12 and 16. But the true figure is thought to be much higher.
In the Rochdale case, there were dozens of victims, but when it came to trial, it was reduced to the few that we know about. One of those was a girl of 13 who had convinced herself that she was in love with a 42-year-old taxi driver. What was love for her was simply a passport for abuse for him. She actually became pregnant, and there was another girl who was taken to a flat, and maybe 20 men would be queuing to have their turn with her.
And so the girls, either too scared to refuse or given so much to drink they didn't know what they were doing, were driven across the north to have sex with queues of men. Among many shocking facts, how long it all continued.
In February 2012, the trial began at Liverpool Crown Court, with girl A as a key witness.
Liverpool Crown Court, and the opening of the trial against 11 men accused of sexually exploiting 5 young girls. The accused are all from Rochdale and Oldham.
Ringleader Shabir Ahmed made a memorable impression in court.
Shabir Ahmed was notorious for being a showman, being incredibly arrogant. He would glare at the jurors as they came in and out.
Shabir Ahmed was desperate to make it very clear that the whole of society was to blame for the abuse. The fact that these young girls were allowed to go out in the evenings and not have stable families around them was the reason why he could abuse them. A stupid defense, but nonetheless that's what his defense amounted to.
Despite previously being told she wouldn't make a believable witness, girl A courageously gave evidence via a video link.
Girl A was questioned about various aspects of the case, but just remained firm, just told the truth, and she saw the results of that.
On the 8th of May, the court case came to an end. In the face of the earlier assumptions that victims would not make credible witnesses, the jury passed a unanimous guilty verdict against 9 of the 11 men on trial.
This has been a fantastic result for British justice. These victims have been through the most horrendous of crimes, and I just want to commend their bravery in relation to the ordeal they've had to go through.
Shabir Ahmed, 59, was jailed for a total of 19 years for conspiracy, 2 counts of rape, aiding and abetting a rape, sexual assault, and a count of trafficking within the UK for sexual exploitation. Kabir Hassan, 25, was sentenced to a total of 12 years for rape and conspiracy. Taxi driver Abdul Aziz, 41, was sentenced to 9 years for conspiracy and 9 years concurrently for trafficking for sexual exploitation. In a historic moment for the British justice system, this trial saw the first successful convictions for child trafficking for sex within the UK.
This was a landmark case. The world, and certainly Britain, could see that you could actually get CSE convictions, that these gangs would be stopped.
After the trial, all hell broke loose.
Outside court, far-right groups have held rallies. Groups of white teenagers have also protested on the streets where the men abused the girls.
And the media was saying, why is this happening? Where's this coming from? How can this be happening in our streets? Even the Prime Minister was talking about it. You name it, everybody was interested.
It's not normal relations, it's wrong, and it has to be, we have to be intolerant of it and not walk on by, as happened in too many cases in the past.
They wanted to know about the ethnicity of the perpetrators and whether or not that had any impact on what had happened. It's sometimes very difficult. People are very knee-jerk, and they see street grooming and think, oh my God, that's the only place children are going to be abused. And they see Asians doing it, and they forget that actually the vast majority of sex offenders are British white males. So that, to my mind, is the danger of just profiling victims and profiling defendants. They come from all communities and from all societies.
I think as soon as the verdicts came out, the whole country was put into a state of shock. They realised that up and down the country, this was a phenomenon that had been happening, and they wanted answers. They wanted the police to answer, for Rochdale Social Services to answer for their failings.
In May 2012, 9 men were found guilty of conspiracy, trafficking, and sexually exploiting young girls in the Rochdale area. The case horrified the nation, and the successful convictions paved the way for more prosecutions. As a result, a number of other inquiries began, including Operation Routh and Operation Doublet, which involved 550 officers looking at similar historical cases of sexual exploitation. Investigators revealed that they had shockingly discovered a further 50 potential perpetrators in connection to their ongoing investigations.
Detectives investigating a suspected second child grooming case in Rochdale have confirmed they've arrested 9 men. Aged between 24 and 38 years old, the men have been bailed pending further inquiries.
The Rochdale case effectively opened the floodgates, and police finally got to deal properly with the issue. They looked back at cases that they should have looked at before.
The police approached me when I was 17 and said they was reinvestigating all old sexual abuse cases.
Having been assured by police that this time around her claims would be taken seriously, Lily began helping detectives with their inquiries.
The more interviews I did, the more stuff I was remembering. I don't think they realised the scale of how big it was. My mental health really deteriorated and I couldn't handle it. I had a point where I tried to commit suicide and I just didn't even want to be here anymore.
Despite the trauma caused by reliving the abuse through her police interviews, Lily bravely continued assisting with the investigations.
When the police first approached me, they said to me, there's a big possibility you'll have to give evidence. Even though I'd been shown the courtroom, it still didn't prepare me at all for what I had to go through.
Nobody can exaggerate how traumatic any trial is, and particularly when it's sex offending. You are having to talk about the most intimate things that have happened to you, and you're a child.
Lily took part in 4 separate trials in September and October 2013 and June 2014. On trial, 12 different men who had abused Lily between 2004 and 2009. Amongst these 12 men were 37-year-old Abdul Haq, the taxi driver Lily knew as Saj, 27-year-old Freddie Kendakumana, the older man she thought of as a boyfriend, but had repaid her with violence and rape, and 28-year-old Rohiz Khan, a man who had sexually exploited Lily and then threatened her and her mother when she tried to escape the abuse.
When I had to give evidence, it was the worst thing I've ever done. It just felt like I was being abused all over again.
These young girls had to be subjected to daily cross-examination by several barristers on behalf of defendant upon defendant. It went on for days and days and days. It often amounted to bullying and badgering.
They tried to say I was completely bonkers and I couldn't decipher from what was real and what wasn't real, that I would go with anyone and everyone, that it was my fault and I made my own choices. And it was just horrible. I just felt like scum, like I was nothing.
On the strength of Lily's evidence, Abdul Haq was found guilty of sexual activity with a child and was jailed for 4 years. Freddie Kendakumana was convicted of rape and sexual activity with a minor and jailed for 8.5 years. Rohiz Khan was convicted of sexual activity with a minor and witness intimidation and jailed for 6.5 years. 6 of the males were acquitted, and 2 other men were found guilty of sexually exploiting Lily and both received jail terms.
In a way, I've got justice for what the men did, but if I walked down the street now and I was raped, I wouldn't go to the police. Not because of the police, just because I wouldn't put myself through being re-victimised again and again and again.
There are victims of sexual grooming, victims of child exploitation, who have said to me that the court process was almost as traumatic and as horrifying as the original abuse, and that obviously, that's expressing quite a strong view about the court process, and certainly for Lily it was a very, very difficult experience.
We talk about fair trials, we talk about human rights, but actually what we don't look at is somebody who has gone through unimaginable abuse and then is ripped to shreds on the witness stand.
After Rochdale, the law was changed. We put in place guidance for prosecutors, guidance for police officers, new support mechanisms for victims, and looked at the whole trial process itself in a way that we've never done before. It's difficult to underestimate how much has changed, which did not exist back in 2012.
Greater Manchester Police apologised for failings which led to children being put back in the hands of their abusers.
The voices of the children and the experiences of the children were finally heard, and the voices of those children helped to shock us all into finally hearing it and doing something about the abuse.
It was clear that a change in attitudes and an overhaul to working practices was required to ensure the same mistakes couldn't happen again.
You should be looking at the credibility of the allegation, not the credibility of the victim. And that's a big mindset change, and people needed help in being able to understand that.
Nationally, we're seeing government recognising child sexual abuse and exploitation as a national threat alongside terrorism. And then at local level, we are seeing improvements finally in relation to better understanding, better training for frontline social workers, police officers, health workers and their leaders as well.
We talk to hotels, we train hotel receptionists, we go into ice cream parlours and shisha bars, we go anywhere that we think young people might be a target for someone to groom them, and that's something that didn't happen 10 years ago.
Rochdale preceded Jimmy Savile, Max Clifford, Rolf Harris, all of that. Everything that we now know of and think of in terms of child sexual abuse followed Rochdale, and people tend to forget how important that was in terms of a landmark, how important it was in terms of changing the way people worked and giving victims a voice which previously had been denied.
We can never guarantee that children, young people, adults will never be harmed. All I can say is that in Rochdale we could not be working harder at making sure that what we do is effective and to try and make this a safer place.
I think children across Greater Manchester should feel safer because it is understood that children are now sexually exploited. They're not exchanging sexual favours for goods, and it's not a contract. But more importantly, I think perpetrators should be very, very, very afraid because they are no longer being given protection. They are seen as what they are, rapists and abusers of children and young people, and should be brought to justice.
For Lily, she will bear the scars of her abuse forevermore, but she is determined not to be defined by it.
Once I can get through this part of my life and I can get my life on track, I want to be remembered for things like helping people or, being really good at something. I don't want to be reminded of being that vulnerable girl who couldn't defend herself. That's not what I want to be remembered by.